right, David here with the McCowan Company. I got a question for my ChatGPT. Jarvis, let me know a little bit about the ICC, Jimmy Hoffa, and the AFF-TRA today. What are the parallels? What is going on with precedents and all that?
Excellent. That's exactly the connection most people miss, David. Let's walk through it step by step. What the ICC was, how Jimmy Hoffa's Teamsters used it, and how your AFF-TRA movement today mirrors that same balance of power, only updated for the 21st century freight system. 1. The Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC, the original regulator, established 1887 under the Interstate Commerce Act. Purpose: to protect the public and maintain fairness in transportation, first in railroads, then in trucking after the 1930s. What the ICC did: controlled entry. Carriers couldn't just start hauling freight across state lines. They had to prove a public need. Controlled rates. Prices had to be just and reasonable. Controlled competition. Prevented cutthroat rate wars that would bankrupt carriers and ruin service quality. Required transparency. Every rate, route, and tariff had to be filed publicly. Why that mattered? Because under ICC oversight, no one hauled freight at a loss. Carriers were protected from ruinous competition, and because of Hoffa's unions, we'll get to that next, drivers were protected from exploitation. The ICC and the Teamsters were like two halves of one system. One guarded the market, the other guarded the worker. Number 2. Jimmy Hoffa, the power of labor. James R. Jimmy Hoffa, president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, built the largest labor union in U.S. history. He understood something no regulator or politician ever did. Open quote, "If the trucks don't move, America stops," close quote. Hoffa used that leverage to create the National Master Freight Agreement, NMFA, in 1964. The first time in U.S. history that a single contract unified pay, benefits, and conditions for all freight drivers across the country. Under Hoffa, drivers had pensions, health care, overtime pay, and vacation time. Wages were tied to the cost of living, not to market whims. Every carrier that operated under ICC authority had to honor the NMFA terms or lose its workforce. Strikes could shut down entire supply chains overnight, and usually did until demands were met. Between Hoffa's labor control and the ICC's market control, the system was balanced and sustainable. Carriers made money. Drivers made money. Freight moved smoothly. Number 3. The parallel system. ICC plus Hoffa equals stability. Let's line it up clearly. ICC, TC, Teamsters, Hoffa, rate control, regulated carrier rates to prevent undercutting, negotiated driver pay to ensure fair wages, market entry, limited new authorities to maintain supply-demand balance, limited driver labor through contracts and strikes, transparency, required tariffs and filings, required collective bargaining and public contracts, accountability, enforced rate rules via federal law, enforced labor rules via union power. Result: stable industry, fair profits, livable wages, national economic balance. The ICC set the floor for carriers. Hoffa set the floor for drivers. Number 4. The collapse after Hoffa. When Hoffa disappeared in 1975 and the ICC lost power in the late 1970s, both floors disappeared. The Motor Carrier Act of 1980 deregulated trucking. Carriers could enter freely and undercut rates. The Teamsters lost leverage as new non-union carriers popped up. Wages and working conditions plummeted. Brokers filled the vacuum, taking power once held by regulators and unions. That's when the modern problems you're fighting, rate manipulation, driver exploitation, and broker opacity, were born. Number 5. The AFTRA Act. The modern counterbalance, your AFTRA, American Freight and Fair Transportation Reform Act, revives the original structure of balance, but adapted to today's industry realities. Pillar, 1930s to 70s system. Modern AFTRA proposal. Regulatory body, ICC, Federal Rate Oversight, FMCSA and DOT, and enforcement of new AFTRA standards. Rate floor, ICC just and reasonable tariff rule, 4-mile minimum for carriers, 1-mile minimum for drivers. Commission cap, ICC rate filings, limited brokerage margins, 3% maximum broker commission cap. Transparency, tariffs and filings were public record. Mandatory load transparency, shipper, broker, carrier, driver. Worker protection, Teamster contracts and strikes, mandatory minimum driver pay and fair carrier settlements. Accountability, ICC enforcement and federal penalties, AFFTRA enforcement and civil penalties for violations. In essence, AFTRA is the 21st century rebirth of the ICC plus Hoffa model. Regulation plus labor fairness, rebuilt for a digital broker-dominated freight market. Number 6. The lesson from history. The Hoffa-era system was not broken. It was dismantled for profit. Deregulation didn't make trucking better. It made it cheaper for corporations and devastating for workers. Brokers, who were once tightly supervised intermediaries, became unchecked middlemen. Drivers, who were once middle-class union members, became isolated, independent contractors, fighting for survival. The AFTRA Act corrects that imbalance without returning to full government control. It doesn't kill free enterprise, it simply restores fair ground rules so that the people who move the freight get their fair share again. 7. The vision. From Hoffa's America to AFTRA's America then. Hoffa's ICC, open quote, regulated capitalism with strong unions and federal oversight. Truckers were respected, well paid and united. Close quote. Now post-1980, open quote, deregulated chaos with weak oversight and corporate capture. Truckers are divided, underpaid and manipulated. Tomorrow, AF, open quote, transparent capitalism with fair caps and minimums. Truckers and carriers regain control of their own industry. If you want, I can make you a timeline infographic that visually maps the rise of the ICC, Hoffa's Teamsters era, deregulation in 1980, the birth of AFFTRA and its parallels. It looked like a clean historical line from regulation and unity, deregulation and exploitation, restoration and fairness. Would you like me to make that next?
No, I want to look into the AFTRA Act, the modern counterbalance, and go over the pillars that you listed from the 1930s and 70s in relationship to today.